There's an often used metaphor of the pebble in the ocean, where a pebble drops in the ocean and the waves go out and extend far beyond the original origin. Well, I've been thinking about 5 years ago. You see, one 16-year-old gentleman basically was that pebble, and the ripples that extend far beyond just him. He didn't intend to start this pebble, but the ripples went not only to his local community, but national and internationally. I'm referring to a gentleman by the name of Zach, who was 16. His parents disapproved of one aspect of his personality, of his being, and so they sent him off to a summer camp to be straightened out. Now, for most people, the reason that they were out there and complaining was an issue of gay rights. Zach was sent off to a camp that engaged in reparative therapy. But that was not necessarily the reason I was involved. I took interest in this because, first off, my favorite book is 1984 by George Orwell. A society where the government, the regime, is so controlling of a person's actions and what they say that almost borders on controlling what they think. What I was all upset about was the notion of coercive brainwashing. For you see, this 16-year-old, before he was shipped off, sent out a message, giving some of the rules and some of the philosophies, some of the circumstances of this camp. And reading over it, it occurred to me that what was going to be happening to him was akin to coercive brainwashing, to change him from who he is to what others demand of him. And I couldn't stand for that. And so, 5 years ago, with a number of others, we sat out in front of this building where this was going on and protested. And it did reach, the national and local and international media of this protest. And so I think, what has happened in the past 5 years? Not necessarily in terms of the gay rights issue, but in terms of this form of coercive brainwashing, this reparative therapy. Well, one of the mistakes these guys made was to try to paint it into clinical form. It was alluded to not only within their own materials, which the 16-year-old provided, but at the time of the protest, I met other people that had been on the inside, had been, participants in this type of therapy, people who had sought to be straightened out. And the things that they told me horrified me. In fact, I've met others over the past 5 years. But in those 5 years, their message got out. There are organizations where they can just speak up and to reveal something that had been going on in silence and basically, under a rock, so to speak, for a number of years. 5 years ago, when it was revealed that this organization, Love in Action, was engaged in this, it brought in CNN, Good Morning America, and lots of other people that asked, what is this all about? Does this even work? In fact, they tried to issue kind of a rebuttal and to defend themselves about 2 weeks into the protest, complete with a guy in a white lab coat explaining in clinical terms how their methods were psychologically and clinically based. It then blew up in their faces because, they're not licensed counselors, they're a ministry. And the state government had them investigated. But in those 5 years, that particular facility has suffered a downfall. The man in the white lab coat, that was their spokesman for one of the local press conferences, came upon some problems within his private practice. It was rumored that his private practice began faltering. The organization which he was trying to defend began losing donations because, once it was revealed what they were doing, not everybody was going to buy into it, and they didn't get tangled up with that. Even more so. Their program, which really got people riled up, dealt with teenagers. As I said, this was a 16-year-old who unwittingly became the pebble in the storm. Now, I'm going to address whether adults have the right to do this. But 2 years after all this happened, they stopped doing this for teenagers. I've been told by people kind of that have inside connections, they don't even do their long-term process anymore. The person who was directing it, the person who was running it for a number of years, he quit about a year and a half ago. He has issued not exact an apology, but at least a reflection that maybe what he was doing wasn't in the best interest of people. He said not necessarily an apology, just a comment, a reflection. A lot of the organizations that were engaged in what's now, what we refer to as ex-gay ministries, a lot of them have gone underground because of the bad press. In 5 years, 5 years ago, they were exposed. And now, they're suffering the consequences for all the actions and all the harm they've done. Because now the victims of that harm have organized and spoken up. Because I've met a number of them. And they are out telling their stories all over the world now. Imagine, just one 16-year-old, not necessarily intending to start anything, just basically telling other people, hey, this is what's going to happen to me. And the news spread. And so I've been thinking, in the past 5 years, has his message spread out? And maybe people are doing better now, because now more of this is out in the open.